Well, again, this is a little bit like my own personal diary, my YouTube channel. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what we were talking about today, eating yourself to death, or whatever vice of choice that you use to not touch your motive and intention of heart. Like we're hiding from God, right? And he doesn't know our thoughts. Even that's really what happened with Adam in the garden with God. Why are you hiding? It's like, don't you know that I see you? I know you. I know what's going on in your heart. But a lot of people don't believe that. I didn't really believe that either. And I had too much trash of wrong motive and intention that was selfish behind me to even think about dealing with my inner woman. I was all an outside of the cup kind of girl, very little honest, sincere communication with a holy God about my true motive and intention, which is really the only phone line to the Lord, motive and intention of the heart. And there are a bunch of scriptures about that. So I was telling a couple friends today about two visions I had when I was passing through the valley of the shadow of death, fearing everything, because I'd lived in a horror show of two people that didn't have any understanding to familiar spirits. So I grew up in the darkness in demonic dimensions with people who had no understanding of their own soul, who let the devil come into play. Just like Jesus said, if you knew who the thief was, you'd lock the door, right? Most people don't know who the thief is and they don't lock the door. And that's what familiar spirits are every day, knocking on our door to see if they can come in and play. I happen to have a couple relatives that actually did die from food drunkenness, my father for one and his sister. So I was pretty sure I was going to die of food drunk. And during the course of my conversion, I went from being a kind of dead Episcopalian, going through to traditional Christianity, where you read out of a prayer book, you don't talk to the Lord about your motives. I moved into another house where a Pentecostal pastor was, and I got filled with the Spirit, went to a different church. That was helpful. I started reading the Bible, like I actually was believing it, kind of. I mean, I was baby stepping my way out of the darkness. But during that course of time, I'd married another man that was very, very dark and lived in the darkness, and that the fall of the human soul really exists when we don't touch the things we condemn ourselves in, that we allow. So I never talked to my parents about anything I ever did that my heart condemned me in. He also likewise came from a very religious family, never talked about motive and intention. The adults didn't. All most people are doing is actually just raising their children under the law, and they don't understand how to help their children pay attention to the compass in their very own soul, the voice of God. So here I am, married to a serial murderer and rapist. They called him the Ted Bundy of Colorado when I'm young. Very dark situation. His brother's a clinical psychologist that treats sexual offenders and has an office with about 20 psychologists, but his brother never asked him for help with his problem. And again, we're talking about very masterful, cunning, crafty people. I have to wonder that about his very own brother, how vexed he was. Anyway, that's not the purpose of this video, because most people are dealing with their vexation of conscience and the war in their soul through some kind of vice or addiction. And so that's really what I want to talk about. And I had a couple visions when I was trying to get out of the darkness and be filled with the light, walk with the Lord, get saved, walk after the Spirit, follow the leading of God, hear his voice. But I had a huge problem. I only read to God in prayer books. And then I started getting honest with him about my motives, which I did very little of, a little because I went to every anonymous program there is, and started the Sexaholics Anonymous in the town I live with a social worker and a district attorney. So I had a lot of man's salvation under my belt, and it wasn't working out very well. A lot of psychology, Christian psychology and worldly psychology, man's salvation. And I want to talk about the difference between man's salvation and God's for a minute too. So I had this dream right before everything busted open in the darkness years ago with the guy I married when I walked after the flesh, who was a flesh walker. So that was all coming to a head. And thank God that I was praying, because I probably wouldn't be alive to do this video right now. But I prayed through all of this, and I was trying to do what was right with his soul in the midst of great darkness and a lot of bad counseling. So we came home from church one day in the Pentecostal church, and I went to bed. I went to take a nap and had a vision that I was in this desert, and there was all these trash bags, and there was a cross there that was about 10 feet tall, and I could hear the voice of the Lord saying, pick up that hammer and grab some nails and start nailing those trash bags on the cross. Well, I'm looking at this mountain of trash bags and the cross, and I said, there's too many trash bags for this cross. They're not going to fit on this cross. And the next thing I knew, after I said that in this vision or dream or whatever it was, I was floating over the planet, and the cross was bigger than the planet. And little did I know how much darkness all the trash I was gonna be having to face, because I was a catch me if you can, run from God. I hope to God you're gonna pass on me not dealing with any of my motive and intentions that are wrong. I just got saved to get out of hell. I didn't get saved to look in the mirror and understand my soul and get understanding to my motive and intentions. So I was that kind of girl. I was raised by that kind of girl. So the other thing that happened after a lot of things went down, and that guy confessed to his crimes and got 150 years in prison, and I was pretty done with ever thinking about getting married at all. I was ready to be a nun, but I was also had a serious problem with food drunkenness. I had all my life because I was comfortless. I didn't have the comforter, the Spirit of truth, the revelation of God's third heaven in my life like ever. I had times where I felt God's presence, but I didn't have any revelation to demonic spirits that were knocking on the door and coming in to play. So I was telling some of my friends about another dream, another vision I had around this, a couple years into it, this nightmare I'm living through. I was on my knees praying, and I saw myself in a desert again. It was like the Lord was giving me a little vision, and I'm out of water, I'm out of food, and I'm basically croaking in this desert, right? But this being of light comes into the desert with this really long train, like really long train on a robe behind him. He was the God of light, Jesus Christ. And he said to me as he's passing me by, just roll over and lay down on my train. I'll take you out of here. I mean, these visions helped me a lot during the hell of going through trying to look at my motives. Even at a few points, I said, Lord, if I start, one of the first honest things I ever said to the Lord was, you gave me this bad guy in my life, right? Because I'm so bad, you sent him to kill me, right? I started telling the Lord the truth about what I really thought. And I also started looking to him and his holy word to heal me from my destructions. So I was in a different place spiritually, but I started getting honest with my motive and intentions. And at one point, I could picture like a big Humpty Dumpty on a wall. And I said, Lord, if I start talking to you about who I really am and what I really think and what I've really done, I'm going to be like a glass Humpty Dumpty on a wall that breaks over and over, and it's not going to be picked up again. I mean, I can't go there. I can't look at that woman in the mirror. It'll be too much of a horror show. Even at another point, I said, I just think I have to withdraw into death, right? My food drunkenness. That's how I coped with my motive and intentions my whole life. So I said, Lord, if I start being honest with you, I'm not kidding you. I'm going to be scrambled eggs all over the floor, like raw scrambled eggs, trying to pick them up with your hands. I said, I don't know if you're going to be able to handle it if I start getting honest. But I'd really always kind of believed that God was an austere man. Why? Most people do when they think God's evil and his will is evil, right? So much easier to do the devil's will and let demons jump into your skin and use you. Yeah, not really. I was coming out of the dark though, and that's what I realized, even at one point, I remember eating a lot of ice cream one night thinking, man, because it was a spirit, that spirit of gluttony, that spirit of food drunkenness. Can I just eat and die? Give strong drink to those that are ready to die, the hopeless that are suicidal and overcome by vices because they don't have revelation from the third heaven. And so I was telling a friend of mine that a lot of people can tell you their crimes. They can tell you what they've done wrong. They can tell you that they lied and they were cunning or crafty, or that they shouldn't have thought the thoughts they thought, or did what they did, or said what they said. But they're still looking for man's salvation. So I just want to end it with this. If we don't get named spirits, we have to start naming spirits. The spirit of gluttony, the spirit of bitterness, the spirit of... That's who Satan was the first one to get bitter. And even when we feel like a victim, what are we going to do? We're going to be destructive towards other people and destructive towards ourselves, living life as a bitter victim. That's why Hebrews said, bitterness defiles. It defiles you and everybody around you. All you're going to be used is to take people down. And I've known a lot of bitter souls that's basically what they've done. Or they've just petted people, peace, peace, when there is no peace, because they still don't want to have a relationship with the God who sees their thoughts, who knows their motives, who knows what they're thinking about him and other people. And so I was telling another one of my friends, we were talking about, because she has a relationship that's distant, not part of our Christian experience here. And the person is very demonized, doesn't have any understanding. So I said, this is the most important thing for me, because when people are not wrestling with the darkness in their soul, we're getting slapped by their darkness. It's what we do from then on that depends on whether that darkness is going to jump into us. Per se, in this person, she's bitter, she's vengeful, she's full of self-pity, she's a whiner, she's a weeper, she's a gnasher, she's slothful, everybody's her victimizer, and everybody is a means to an end for her to use. Everybody should be serving her happiness. So there's a lot of demonic conditions of soul that she's living in because she's let familiar spirits in, right? And I said, you're going to get slapped in the face, and your first response is going to be, and she even said this. I thought this was so powerful, because it doesn't matter if somebody has a cup of water and they're throwing at you, whether it's hot or cold or room temperature, you're going to go, gasp. You're going to gasp when somebody throws water on you. That's what it's like when we're being accosted by darkness in somebody else that they're not facing. And what we do from then on is going to prove how much we really care about following peace and holiness with all men. And I said, that's why I have to shake myself off. Even one time, it's about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, darkness accosted me out of somebody's mouth, and I actually opened my refrigerator door and hid behind it and went, spitting off the response of that demonic assault and saying, okay, Lord, help me grip it up here. Show me how to wash feet now, because this was a big hit. I'm taking this personally. I got to shake off that personal response so I can actually do your will now, instead of relating to this person out of a personal offense, my own happiness, chasing them after my own pleasure, or actually just shaking off the darkness and trying to understand the demons so I can give them a testimony and wash their feet. And that's what being a foot washer is. With a basin, it's tapping into the third heaven, where you actually have a testimony. Instead of giving people the law, dealing with them out of your offense or your vengeance or your own personal rage, And man, has it been sad, because I've come into a lot of different hearts of people I'm not around very much, that still have a really deep root of bitterness and vengeance. Pity and vengeance are like a coin. Which side is it going to be tossed on? And once I start feeling sorry for myself, I'm going to feel sorry for everybody else and help them become a little more, kill themselves with food, right? That's what happens when you have that kind of chatter. You increase people's troubled souls because you're enforcing the fact that they're a victim of God and man, because we're just fighting principalities, powers, and rulers. And even to be able to judge and say, I'm wrong, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. How about getting some revelation spiritually? Name this demon. Let's start naming demons. Again, I talked about that last night. I really think that that's the game of the spirit. Name that spirit. The spiritual person judges all things. They judge spirits. So they don't open the doors for them personally. And then they have a testimony, and they can help overcome Satan in somebody else's life by being forgiven for letting that demon in their door. Pride, lying, whatever it is. There's no sin that's not common to man. There's no prince and power and ruler that's not common to us to submit to. Therein, people that are being saved from the familiar spirits and those that aren't, because the people that aren't don't have any testimonies, right? They haven't been forgiven. They haven't been washed. A lot of people have worldly sorrow, and then they do man's salvation where they just mentally ascend to be different, but they don't have a testimony. They're not, God, against you alone have I sinned and done what's evil in your sight. Please forgive me for how I interacted with your child, the thoughts of my heart towards your children. Give me a right spirit and a free spirit, and then I'll teach other transgressors how to wash feet instead of being bitter and critical and offended and living in Satan's dimension where you take everybody down because you're hard-hearted, because you don't look at your motive and intention and let God help you. Your Redeemer came to expose your motive and intentions so he could save you. That is the road less traveled, though. I hope this helps somebody today. Amen.